Hey guys, it's the Disco Spider, and Merry Christmas! Today I'll be doing a similar video I did back on Halloween where I reviewed random cartoon holiday-themed episodes. And this time I'll be looking at 8 cartoon Christmas episodes. And also this time it'll be actually holiday-themed instead of vaguely having the Halloween tone. And these aren't like preference or like top 10 best or worst or whatever. It's just random holiday episodes from random cartoons that I want to review. So let's get on with it. The first one we have here is Simpsons roasting on an open fire from The Simpsons. This is not only the first ever Simpsons Christmas special, but the first ever Simpsons episode ever, being the only Simpsons episode to air in the 80s. And what I love most about this episode is how it feels like a standalone Christmas special. If this was just a one-of thing, it still would have been amazing. Anyone who isn't even that big on The Simpsons could easily watch this yearly along with the other Christmas specials. This episode could feel really relatable to some people, which is not all that common thinking of other popular Christmas specials such as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and How the Grinch Stole Christmas. This could easily hit home for some people, yet still make people smile because of how much heart there is in the episode. And what I love about early Simpsons was the heart. They nailed it down. Not only was the comedy, which I'll get to in a minute, but there was a ton of heart, making the show different from any other sitcom around this time. Seeing Homer try and fail to have a good Christmas is at times comedic, but mostly sad, and feeling sad and sorry for Homer is what lead to the end of the episode where you're happy that finally something goes right and he has successfully pulled out a good Christmas. And as for the comedy, this episode is quite funny. Maybe not as funny as a lot of other early Simpsons episodes, but I still got quite a few laughs. The only problem I have with this episode was, since it was the first, there are a few things that they changed throughout the season or the series, like how Homer's and Mr. Burns' voice are completely different, so is Barney's hair, and the whole look of the characters felt very dirty, like characters from the late 80s, early 90s. Although that's only a minor issue and doesn't really ruin anything from the show, but it's a little jarring when you're watching it, seeing all these things that you're just so used to the older, newer Simpsons that it just feels weird. But anyways, I highly recommend this episode for Christmas. This is a definite must-watch for anyone over the holidays. Next is a Pinky and the Brain Christmas from Pinky and the Brain. This episode actually won an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program, and although I do like this episode, I don't think this is one of the best of the series. What I like from this episode is that it does have heart and does make Brain likable when he is being a jerk to Pinky. And this episode is quite fun, having a good plot that actually goes along with the Christmas theme, along with quite a few jokes. But the main problem I have with this episode is at the very end when Brain just tries to destroy his machine that he made to rule the world. That seemed so random, and I get that Brain was really sad for Pinky, and it was a touching scene, but the whole episode was about his machine to get his dolls to brainwash people so he could take over the world on Christmas. But at the end, he just destroys it. And I get it was supposed to be because it's Christmas and he wanted everyone to have a Merry Christmas and all that. But it would have been better if something else destroyed the machine. And Pinky could have been sad that all of Brain's work went down the drain. But Brain could have said that he didn't care. And that's Christmas and we should spend it with the ones we love instead of taking over the world. That would have been a more touching scene. But from what we've got here, I still think it's a good Christmas special, and if you can find it either online, TV, or DVD, then I would still recommend watching it, but it's nothing really to seek out. Next up, we have Rocko's Modern Christmas from Rocko's Modern Life. I really love this episode, although this episode doesn't have the main thing I love about the show itself, which is the cartoony exaggerations on life. This episode is still great and has a great message on being nice to people and spreading the holiday joy. There isn't much of a story, but it's still very entertaining. Throughout the 22-minute episode, I didn't find myself being bored. I was fully invested in the story, since there was quite a few laughs in the episode that I thought was funny. For anyone who's a fan of Rocko's Modern Life like myself, this is a definite good one to watch for the holidays. Next up, we have Christmas Who from SpongeBob SquarePants. This is definitely a classic SpongeBob episode, and even though I've seen this episode quite a few times, it will never get old. Then again, this episode did come in Season 2 when SpongeBob was in his prime. The highlight of the episode for me was seeing Squidward finally being nice to SpongeBob and actually doing something nice for a change, which is really touching to see, seeing how sad SpongeBob was and how much of a jerk Squidward was being, and it was just so nice seeing some heart coming from Squidward. And along with that, there was a lot of laughs, especially the Patchy segments I found really funny and silly. And the songs were great too, although there was only one full Christmas song, it was still really enjoyable and really catchy. This is another great Christmas special, and definitely a great one to watch for Christmas, with heart, comedy, a catchy song, and fun Patchy segments. Next up is Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas from Community. Now, I know what you're gonna say, Disco Spider, if that's even your real name. Community isn't a cartoon, and although you are right, however, this episode is all in stop motion except for a second where you see the reflection of the characters on the TV. And I never technically said it had to be from a cartoon show, but just the episode had to be animated. I know I'm stretching, but for Community, it's worth it. First off, the animation is great. I love the way the characters move, and they look like the actual actors, and they get creative with all the places they go and the things that they transform into. And another thing is that this episode actually has a reason to be stop motion, instead of not using it all or anything. They take full advantage of being stop motion and being animated, and that's awesome. And as for the story, it's a simple one, but I feel like it's supposed to be like your typical stop-motion Christmas special, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or anything else, being very Christmas-themed and having insane Christmas backgrounds and locations. And this episode does give off an old Christmas special vibe, which is great, and the whole message of the actual meaning of Christmas is pretty simple yet completely true. And the songs are pretty good, but not that memorable. Nothing bad, but nothing I'd hum in my head after watching the episode, like the Christmas Who song in Spongebob. And the last thing I want to mention is the comedy. For me, the comedy is a big reason why I love Community, and luckily this episode has a lot of it. It is very meta, and that's like most of the show is just a lot of it. The comedy is meta, but there's other comedy there. It just doesn't get stale or anything like that. I do recommend watching this episode for Christmas. This is definitely one of my favorites to watch for Christmas. And if you like this episode, then go out and check the series. It is by the co-creator of Rick and Morty, and it's definitely worth it. Next is Twas the Fight Before Christmas from the Powerpuff Girls. Holy crap, is this special boring. It's 44 minutes long and barely anything fun happens. The story is basic, but that doesn't mean it's bad. But what does make it bad is how barely anything happens in this special. It came out around season 4 and 5, and this special is included on the season 4 disc in the complete series since it's a special and not an actual episode. And around season 4, 5, and 6, the episodes started to get boring. Granted, there were a few good ones in season 4, but pretty much every episode of season 5 and 6 were really boring by having basic plots and not having much in the episode. This special is a giant example of that. There's a whole chase scene that takes place for 7 minutes, and all it is just the girls and princess chasing each other. That's it. The episode is just so boring and not even funny. I might have snickered a few times, but that's about it, nothing much. And the whole spirit of Christmas isn't even there. You can easily tell they're just making something to play throughout the holidays while making money instead of making an actual entertaining special. Actually, come to think of it, Codename Kids Next Door had a very similar Christmas special where a naughty villain, or a couple in this case, sneak into Santa's workshop and change the list so they're the only nice ones and the rest of the kids get cool. The Kids Next Door one was actually really entertaining because it had a lot of things going on with intense action scenes, a lot of comedy, and a cool twist and things I didn't expect when watching the special. Keep me to the edge where I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? I'm very invested. While the Powerpuff Girls one is very predictable, and it just feels like it's going through the motions. You're like, yep, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and oh, let me guess, this is going to happen, and guess what? It does. And the Kids Next Door one also had some really cool new characters that were parodies of superheroes like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. And the end scene was actually memorable where one of the main characters becomes selfish and evil, and it was justified. And number 4 had to save the day with a touching scene. The ending of the Powerpuff Girls specials ends on Princess yelling at Santa, Santa taking away her powers, and the girls go deliver toys for Santa in a boring montage. There's a lot more I could say about the Kids Next Door episode than this one. I would recommend you just to skip this one and watch the Kids Next Door one instead, because that one was actually really fun while capturing the spirit of Christmas in their own fun way. While the Powerpuff Girls special is just a giant pile of shit. Or should I say pile of Powerpuff Girls reboot. Next up is The Fright Before Christmas from Danny Phantom. I gotta say, this one is great. I love how it has the spirit of Christmas along with feeling like your typical Danny Phantom episode with a great mixture of both. I love how this episode is made out of rhyme, which is real hard to do when it's done all the time, and there was only one stretch of a rhyme that I noticed, while everything else except for the beginning was all rhyme for this. And let me just say that Will Arnett voicing the main villain was great and a good treat to hear. And my favorite part of the episode was seeing all the ghost villains throughout the series help Danny, since it was Christmas and they did make a pact that today is the only day where they're not going to do any bad, or something like that. And I wish I saw more of the villains and Danny being together, because I just thought that was really cool. But yeah, I really love this episode, and it's another great episode to watch for Christmas. And last one we have today is Holi Secrets from Adventure Time. This episode did come out early in the Adventure Time run, and I love this episode a lot. I love the atmosphere of this episode that is featured throughout the beginning of the series and is very prevalent here. This episode at first doesn't feel like a Christmas special, but throughout all the shenanigans, it does come out as one. And the way that all the things that happened connected to the end being very Christmassy is cool to see. The first half of the episode is about Ice King trying to find out what Finn and Jake are watching, which is fun to see. And the second half of the episode is Ice King trying to break into Finn and Jake's house with an army of snow people and trying to retrieve the tapes, which is also fun to see. In short, Ice King was the highlight of the episode and was just really fun. And the tapes that Finn and Jake were watching were funny. A lot of them were awkward, but that's where the humor came from, seeing how insecure Ice King is. And the main part of the episode that I have to talk about is that this episode is pretty much responsible for starting the Adventure Time subplots. Granted, there were a few before this episode, such as the Lich, but it's way more prevalent here than in the other ones. And although I do kind of blame this episode for being responsible for making Adventure Time having so many subplots to the point where it did ruin the series for me, but in here it is taken care of quite nicely, because we know quite a lot about Ice King's past, because that he used to be, spoiler alert, a human being, but because of this mysterious crown he became like this, but also opened the doors to a lot of unanswered questions that probably won't get answered ever, or if it does get answered, just open up twice as many questions. But besides Simon and Marcy, this is probably the best Simon story arc episode, and in general, just a really nice episode to watch, not only for Christmas, but the way they made this episode could easily work nicely for any time of the year. And that wraps up this year's Christmas special. What did you guys think of the 8 specials I talked about? And what are some of your favorite Christmas specials that you love watching around this time of year? For me, I tend to just watch any Christmas-related episode that I own on DVD as like a Christmas marathon before the Christmas holidays. And with that, I'm the Disco Spider, and peace out.